So we are recording this session. Quite a few people could not join, but no worries to them. They can still listen to it afterwards. So Roman, thanks again for joining and willing to join our Patreon community and share your knowledge about agile product development and anything that you would like to share about it.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks for having me. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, and for the people, my hunch is that if you are working in agile environments in the agile community for a while, then probably somewhere, somehow you might have heard the name of Roman Pichler. If not, just showing some books always helps. He wrote this book, Agile Project Management with Scrum, I don't know, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, something like that. After that, this one, Strategize, followed. And recently he wrote How to Lead with Product Management, this one. I noticed, Roman, that you also wrote a book in general about Scrum. That was probably your first book, but I have to admit that that was a discovery I only recently made.
Yeah, that's right. That was quite a while back. Sort of in hindsight, a slightly, I don't know, bizarre story, I guess. A publisher approached me, and the publisher had worked with another author, but somehow the collaboration wasn't very successful. And so they were desperate to have somebody to write the book on Scrum. And I wasn't really initially particularly interested, and I really at this stage didn't have any plans whatsoever to write a book. But, you know, as they invited me and they seemed very keen, I said, like, all right, then how hard can it be?
Excellent. And was it hard afterwards, or was it okay to do?
It was interesting, but I think it was the book that was, you know, in a way the easiest for me to write. Certainly the time it took, it was the fastest book. So it only took me about 8 to 9 months to write the book. My other books took me considerably longer.
Yeah, I recognize it. So the structure of this meetup is quite straightforward. It's a Q&A. And we already got quite a lot of questions. That does not mean that we strictly need to stick to these questions. If while talking another question emerges, then feel free to share it via the chat. Then maybe we can just include it. It's a 60-minute meetup for Roman. It's a 90-minute meetup for all the other people, because we're going to use the remaining 30 minutes to do some reflection with each other, probably by doing an impromptu networking. So 90 minutes in total, 60 minutes together with Roman, 55 minutes left of that. So this is the moment where I'll stop talking and basically give the floor to you, Roman.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Barry. So let me quickly share my screen with you, because based on the questions that you've kindly asked, I have prepared a few slides. I don't necessarily want to turn this into a formal presentation. However, I find that if I just speak for 60 minutes and answer a bunch of questions, sometimes it's kind of difficult to follow, and then having a little bit of something visuals and visual clues can be helpful. And I've got my iPad here and my pen, so I can do some drawings and sketches as well, if that's helpful. So the first question that I see here in the backlog is, what if a product owner doesn't have the mandate to make important decisions about the product? It seems to me that that's a rather common challenge for product people, for product owners. So many product people feel they're not sufficiently empowered. They don't really fully own the product. And so I thought it might be helpful to reflect a little bit on the product owner role, and what kind of empowerment, what kind of decision-making authority product owners should have. And so when I think about this, well, this is even animated, I think, which is highly exciting. So when I think about empowerment in a product owner context, I like to go back to the term product owner. And until very recently, Scrum didn't really define what a product is, but it's always been full of product terminology. There's a product owner, there's a product backlog, there are product increments, so lots of product. Now, my take on what a product is the following. It's an asset. So in our context, typically a piece of software that creates tangible value. So real value for users, possibly some customers, and the business, the company developing and offering, providing the product. And I'd add that the product has to be able to do this largely on its own. So something that creates tangible, measurable value for a group of people, users, possibly customers in the business. Now, if that's a product, what does it then mean to own a product? And my understanding is, and in fact, I think has been for a while, is that somebody who owns a product should really control this product and have ownership in its entirety. So, not only look after the detailed, the tactical product decisions, so the items in the product backlog, the epics and user stories, but also be authorized and empowered to make the necessary strategic decisions and reach out to users and customers and do some competitor analysis, for instance, and measure the product performance. And at the same token, and I think that's something that's been an element in Scrum for quite a while, the product owner should then be responsible for the value the product creates, or even for maximizing that value. So certainly from a Scrum perspective, a product owner must be empowered and must be sufficiently empowered. But that's the theory, right? And a wise man once said, in theory, there's no difference between practice and theory, but in practice, there is. So when I talk to different people who tell me they work as product owners, I find that sometimes those individuals own a product, and sometimes they own less, and sometimes they own more. So I thought it might be useful to take a look at this. And then that might help us answer the question around what to do with the challenge when you don't have quite the right mandate or level of empowerment, I guess. So there are 6 types that I'd like to sort of briefly share with you. The first one is the Scrum product owner in the sense just discussed. So for me, somebody who plays the role of a Scrum product owner should own the product in its entirety, top to bottom. I can say a few words about this a little bit later if you'd like me to. But then it can be useful sometimes, particularly when a product grows and becomes successful and attracts more features, more functionality, to have people who own parts of that product. And if it's an end user facing capability, say search and navigation or payment, or the ability to pay on an online retailer's website, like say Amazon, then you might choose to use somebody who owns such a specific feature like search and navigation. And I personally like to use the term feature owner, because I feel that somebody who owns a feature, well, clearly has ownership, but it's different from owning a product. As the Scrum product owner, I'm really responsible for maximizing the value. That means ultimately the commercial success. Certainly if it's a revenue generating product, or a product that supports other revenue generating products or services. Whereas as a feature owner, I'm responsible for the success of my feature. So it's a more focused job. It can still be a very rewarding, it can still be a very challenging job. So, this is not meant to be judgmental in any way, but I do think it's important to use the right terms. It's happened to me more than once that I was asked by clients to run a product owner workshop, only to come into a room full of people. And I remember one specific occasion where this workshop took place at a geo company based at the South Coast here in the UK, where I'm based. And I was really surprised by the amount of people, because I expected sort of maximum of 10. There were like about 25 people or so. So, I thank everybody for showing up, but say, it's nice that you're interested in this workshop, but it's a workshop for the product owners. So nobody moves, everybody nods and says like, yeah, we know. So now I'm confused, and I'm saying, but surely you can't be all product owners, right? It turned out people weren't quite product owners. Some of them were feature owner, but most of them, in fact, were component owners. So most of the development teams at this stage owned architecture building blocks, layers or components, a collection of components. And the people, most of the product owners in the room, they weren't looking after an entire product, but part of a product, and in fact, an architecture building block, such a component. And again, it can make sense to have component owners to share the responsibility on, when you work on a large product. But of course, being a component owner is different again from being a feature owner and a product owner. I need in-depth technical skills typically in order to be successful as a component owner. And I would primarily look after an individual component or architecture building block. Might be a service or a collection of maybe microservices. So, depending on what kind of product role you play, you may lack more or less empowerment. So what I'm trying to say is, if a feature owner is not empowered or fully empowered to make the strategic decisions of a product, I'd say, yeah, I can dig it. It's all right. That's okay. I would say, I think it'd be nice for a feature owner and component owner to contribute to the strategic decisions, but not necessarily owning the product strategy. But if it's a Scrum product owner, I think that's a real issue. I think a Scrum product owner should really own, as I said earlier, the product holistically, and that includes the strategic decisions. To finish this off, there is another type of a product owner, and that is the safe product owner, as you may know. In hindsight, I think it's a mistake that SAFe introduced or recycled the product owner term, because my understanding is that the SAFe product owner is very different from the Scrum product owner, without admittedly being a SAFe expert. I believe that the SAFe product owner looks after the product details and the product backlog, or part of a backlog, a team backlog, and works with development team. So it's a much more inward focused and tactical role. Again, quite different from the Scrum product owner. And then if you have something like a software platform, an internal platform that encapsulates shared assets or services, then sometimes it makes sense to have a dedicated owner for that, for this technical product. So the platform owner here is like a Scrum product owner, but would require technical knowledge. And then if you have a portfolio, a group of products, so here in this example, we have 3 products, then it may make sense to have a product portfolio owner. And again, this individual, or this role, the role that the individual plays, would require a different level of authority and empowerment. A product portfolio owner would be responsible for maximizing the value a group of related products create. Think of, for instance, Microsoft Office with the core products, PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. And then product owner responsible for an individual product in Scrum. And then we have feature and component owner who own product parts and are responsible for those product parts. So again, depending on what kind of owner you are, you will need a different level of authority and empowerment, and you will benefit from different skills, different capabilities. So the first step I tend to recommend doing is reflecting on what are your current responsibilities, what is your current role, and if you work as a product person, where do you belong on this picture? Does one of those roles resonate with you? And again, if you're the Scrum product owner and you don't have the appropriate mandate to own the product and ultimately make a decision if no consensus can be achieved, I really do think that's a real issue.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Roman. So this question got the most votes. Well, by now the same number of votes with another question, but again, it's quite a popular question. Is there someone that says, okay, we're quite close, but just got one question remaining about this one, about the product owner and the mandates? Then feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Doralin speaking. In LESS, you have the chief product owner, or you have also the product area product owner. So how where you put them in this picture?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Again, I'm not a scaling expert, so I'm not a LESS expert. I'm not a SAFe expert. I tend to have a strong product focus, and yes, so I tend to kind of stick to product management. I had an email conversation with Bas Vodde, one of the LESS founders, and I know Bas from way back. I used to do sort of a little bit of work with Bas back in the day, and because I was interested in sort of finding out what his take on the feature owner is. And so from what he told me, I believe that the LESS area product owner has more responsibility than the feature owner here on this picture. So it seems that a LESS area product owner really owns more like a bundle of features, or a collection of features. So in a way, it's in between the Scrum product owner and the feature owner here. So, you know, these are all just different concepts and ways how to share ownership when you work on a large product.
Yeah.
And so if you work with less, then I would suggest you consider sticking with the less terms, and that's cool. And I think that Les generally has done a good job at describing the different product roles. I also think that Safe, that's my impression, has done a good job at describing the different product roles. My only, in a way, criticism, if you want so, is that Les has reused the term product owner, and you know that in a way I think has created even more confusion about what it means to be a product owner and what kind of empowerment or mandate or authority I need to succeed in my job.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, it's not really about, I mean, see, in my work, I've started to try and avoid the term product owner altogether, and I've started to follow Rich Mirnov, who's a colleague of mine, and I don't know, you might know Rich because first of all, he's written a book. Secondly, he's got a really good product management blog, and he's been around for a long time. But also, he is the founder of product camps, so product management unconferences that tend to be very popular when no major pandemic is going on. And so Rich suggested to me a while back to just kind of to use the term product people and product person, and that resonated with me. I thought, like, that's kind of cool because that gets us out of those kind of difficult conversations. So, you know, who are you? Product manager, product owner. Okay, what kind of product manager? Okay, what kind of product owner? It's like, man, you know, it's really about creating value for people and people. So the users and customers and the business is just a collection of individuals too at the end of the day, right?
It seems like with this edition, we're already covering the next question, which is about what's the difference between a product manager and a product owner.
Yes, yeah. So thank you, Barry. So some of you might know that an earlier version of the Scrum framework, I think basically my understanding is the first version of the Scrum framework, so the proto Scrum framework, so to say, didn't use the term product owner, but product manager. And I believe that one of the key reasons why Ken Schwaber, who's been, I think, really the driving force in coining the Scrum terms, chose then the term product owner, or changed the term from product manager to product owner, is to emphasize the level of ownership and empowerment product people need in an agile environment where we value collaboration, right? We want to draw in development team members, or these days called developers, in the decision-making process or processes, and we want to draw in the stakeholders as well. And sometimes we want to draw in the customers and users too. So it's highly collaborative, lots of people. But these individuals, they come from different backgrounds, they have different perspectives. So it's unlikely that they'll always agree. And sometimes we don't have the time to go through lengthy decision-making processes. Sometimes we need a decision made quite quickly. And so if no consensus, no agreement can be reached within a reasonable point in time, then somebody needs to be empowered to make that decision to keep the product moving forward. And it might be just to run an experiment or a couple of experiments, so then that we then have the right data and are in a better position to make the decision together when we meet again at the end of the next sprint, say. And so, you know, this is, I think, for me, that's an important idea, concept behind the product owner. Now in Safe, again, you know, don't want to go on too much about Safe because, as I said, I'm not a Safe expert, but in Safe you have a product manager, and that product manager complements the Safe product owner. And so, whereas in Scrum, you just have a Scrum product owner. And my understanding's always been that the Scrum product owner is a product manager, is the Agile product manager. In fact, I'm so excited by this that I'll write it down here. So this is the Agile product manager. So if you read the first book that Barry kindly showed, Agile Product Management with Scrum, this is essentially how you'll find the role portrayed, described. And so for me, a Scrum product owner has to have holistic ownership, full stack ownership from the vision down to the tactics, the product backlog. Whereas in Safe, you can see that the decision-making authority is split. The product owner is more a strategic product role, is more outward focused, you could say. The safe product owner is more a tactical product role, more inward focused. And that's one way how you can scale. It's certainly not the only way. So you could, for instance, use feature and component owners or area owners as Les does it, or you could choose not to share product ownership, but split your product and unbundle features and unpack them into products and apps in their own right. Think of what Facebook did with Messenger all those years ago. So, I tend to recommend to organizations that I work with either to choose the term product manager or product owner, but to try and avoid using both terms, because I feel that it can create confusion. And I've certainly worked with companies where the product managers were desperate to become these hip, trendy, cool product owners. And I've experienced organizations where the product owners finally wanted to grow up and become those powerful product managers, to be really in control of the product. And so I think that's not beneficial at the end of the day for the organization. It just creates division between the product people. And so, yeah, my suggestion is shoot either for the term product owner or choose the term product manager, and then maybe supplement it with junior or senior, and consider introducing specialized product roles such as feature owner or area product owner if that's something that is useful for you.
Yeah, I see that Martin, see in the chat that you raised another question. Can you elaborate on that one? Can you share it?
Yeah, of course. So basically, I have gotten into the situation where we have an incredibly knowledgeable and experienced product owner who's got a lot of experience and history with the product that he's now working on. And that kind of translates now into the situation where, rather than trying to seek the benefit for the customer, it is basically their own vision of what it needs to be and what it should look like and what perfection, for the lack of a better word, looks like. So the value maximization aspect of product ownership kind of gets lost somewhere along the way. Because again, from what I believe is the reason that they have so much experience and so much knowledge that only once it is living up to their own expectations, they feel it is good enough for the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. I mean, that can happen. It can happen that we sort of develop a somewhat myopic outlook on our product, and we believe we know best, and we don't really need to talk or listen to the customers and users, and don't necessarily need to look at any data, any analytics data that we have in order to make the right product decisions. What I like to suggest in such a situation is, and I'll just try and find the right article if I can. This is hopefully not going to take too long. We're nearly there. I think we're nearly there.
Take your time.
Sorry, that was even the wrong one. Oh, come on. Here we are. So, yes, I think that's good enough. So, you don't necessarily have to use, of course, this specific template, but if you'd like to, you could consider using this product vision board template that I created a number of years ago in order to get together with your product owner, maybe also invite some of the key stakeholders possibly, and really make explicit who the beneficiaries of the product are, who are the users, who are the customers. Why do you believe they're using the product? What are the key features that set the product apart from the competition, that make it unique or that make it stand out? And how does the product serve the business? Now, once you've got this down, and once you're confident enough that you've kind of nailed these questions here, or you've correctly described target group needs, product and business goals, you can then say, are we using the right KPIs, the right key performance indicators, the right metrics in order to collect data and see how our product is performing? Do we know how the product is performing? I mean, if the product has been performing tremendously well, and your product owner says, you know what, I know the market, I know what people need, I don't need to talk to them, I don't need to look at the analytics, and my product has been performing in amazing ways for the past 2 years, and everything's just going up. All the indicators are going up and up and up. It's like, hey, good on her, good on him. pretty amazing. It's like, that's great. But that might not be the case. So generally speaking, I'd say you're probably better off identifying those KPIs and measuring the data, collecting the data, evaluating the performance. And then when you see, okay, we've got some issues around, say, engagement or acquisition, or we've got some issues around conversion, or maybe some other form of revenue generation, or maybe the cost is going through the roof, or we've got some quality issues, more and more bugs are building up, there's more and more spaghetti software, code complexity is increasing, then you've found areas in your product that you should probably address. And you can then come up with something like a product roadmap, a plan of action in order to address those areas and hopefully move your product forward.
So speaking about a roadmap, there's another question. It's quite a long one. I'll read it. How can we create a flexible and outcome-oriented and not output-oriented roadmap? And how should the product goal be integrated into that roadmap? Or rather, how should they be related to each other?
Yes, nice question. So, where do I start? I've got all these slides here, and I'm sort of currently thinking, what's the best way now to start the conversation? So maybe I'll show you this here as an example of how you can build a product roadmap that contains product goals. And again, this is a specific template that I've created, so don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to advertise my templates here. If they resonate with you, that's great. You can download them from my website if you wish to. If they don't resonate with you, that's equally great. So the point is not to use a specific structure and fill out some boxes. The point, what I'm trying to do is just to illustrate how you can define what value is and then track that value. That's why I thought I'd quickly show the product vision board. And here in this case, how can you have a product roadmap that is effective in an agile context where we usually have a more or less significant amount of uncertainty and change? And how can you integrate product goals onto the product roadmap? So again, this is a specific template that I've suggested.
Roman, we don't see the template yet. We see a black slide that says product goals and roadmaps.
Oh, I'm sorry about this.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, yeah. That's very strange. Sorry. Yeah, that was a technical glitch, I think. So yeah, so product goal, product goal is a fairly new addition to the Scrum Guide. So then the new Scrum Guide that was released in November 2020 features the product goal. And the idea is that's the long-term objective that aligns the product owner, Scrum Master, the developers, formerly known as development team. And, the Scrum team works on one product goal at a time. Now, as Scrum is a generic framework, it doesn't really define in detail what the product goal is, and it certainly doesn't say how to apply the product goal. So, this is my interpretation. And as it happens, I've been using product goals for a little while in my work. I started out by, in a way, calling them release goals. And so if you look at my book Strategize, it still has the term release goal in there, something that I need to fix soonish. But yeah, in recent years, I've preferred the term product goal, as not all teams work with releases or major releases. So let's look at a few goals here. So the initial goal for something like an MVP, if we're building a new product, so this could be a healthy eating product, a well-being product, could be to acquire an initial user base. That would be sort of a business aspect, and then help me understand my eating habits as a user benefit. So I'm formulating here a compound goal, a little bit like a compound. User stories consists of two parts, a business part and a user part. The benefit of that being that you don't lose track of either. Products are value creating vehicles. So I quite like to always try and keep the two value creation aspects visible. So the user facing one and the business facing one. But you don't have to do this, of course, if you don't like to. And then maybe the next thing could be to improve to grow the user base. And we could do this by helping people improve their eating habits. And then finally, start generating revenue and entice people to make in-app purchases and generally improve the fitness levels of the individuals. So you can see that these product goals, they relate, they sort of form a cohesive story and narrative. And they are certainly influenced by the business model. So here, the idea is that the product will be offered using a freemium business model, basic version for free, and then we generate money, we monetize the app through in-app purchases. And then there's some other stuff on here. You may want to choose to add some dates. Personally, for internal roadmaps, I like to work with dates, but I guess that's a different discussion. And then if those goals are associated with new product versions or major releases, then sometimes it makes sense to give them names. I mean, I've chosen very boring names here, but I'm sure you can be much more creative. I used to love the names that the Android operating system used, like Marshmallow and Kit Kat and all sorts of cool names. And then features here are 2 to 3 key high-level capabilities. And the idea with any goal-oriented or outcome-based or benefits-based or themed product roadmap. So for me, these terms are largely interchangeable. In product management, we have a tendency to, in a way, reinvent the wheel and to use different terms to mean the same thing. So, with any sort of outcome-based, goal-oriented roadmap, the goal, the outcome, the benefit has to come first, and then the features should only exist in order to show what output is necessary in order to achieve the desired outcome and meet those goals. And then the metrics here, they should ensure that the goals are measurable. So I think product goals, that's at least my suggestion, should really be specific and measurable. Otherwise, I think they might only offer limited benefit. Yeah. But again, that's related to how I like to use goals. And so just maybe to briefly put them into context, that's sort of the goal hierarchy that I like to work with and I've suggested. So for me, a product goal connects a sprint goal with a user and business goals that I would expect in a product strategy. And user and business goals are there to achieve an overarching vision, the positive change that the product should bring about, or the ultimate purpose of the product. Yeah. And you can see my suggestion for product goals is to kind of limit them to the next 2 to 6 months, or 2 to 6 months at a time. As a rule of thumb, maybe 3 months as a default. And then obviously sprint goals are much shorter in terms of their duration or relevant time frame, and user and business goals, they tend to last longer. And I like to either literally derive product goals from the user and business goals. So if that's the case, then a product goal becomes a sub goal of a user and business goals. And I think that's really neat, because that way you then systematically connect your roadmap to the strategy. So if you capture your product goals on your roadmap, then your roadmap and your strategy are neatly linked. I think that's really cool. Yeah. Or alternatively, if you have an existing product, then and you say you use the product performance as indicated earlier to identify areas of improvement and new product goals, then you should make sure that any new product goal is in line with the overarching user and business goals, so that your product goals and your product roadmap always help you implement your overarching product strategy, and ultimately that you create enough the desired value for the users and the business.
Thanks, Roman. You managed to share knowledge about the product vision, the product goal, an outcome-oriented roadmap, and sprint goals. And that within about 7 minutes, so well done. So I can imagine, because we already covered quite a couple of questions from the backlog, I can imagine that maybe I also see it in the chat that some new questions have emerged that might also give you the opportunity to take a sip of water or something like that. Is there someone that has a related question about it? Then feel free to just unmute yourself and share your question.
It's again me, Doralin. If I'm looking to the previous template, I saw that the features are somehow related with, especially to the user goals. Is a coincidence, or do I understand this correctly?
No, that's right. So thank you for asking that question. That's right. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So, if I want to generate revenue through in-app purchases, then maybe I need to do a little bit of work on my app leading up, say in version 2, so around here. Maybe I need to add a feature here, or that covers a piece of work around sort of get the app ready to be successfully submitted to the major app stores, the Android App Store and the iOS App Store, depending on which platforms I target. But yeah, the way I've done it here is that they're largely related to the user goals. I mean, this is a made up example to keep things simple and use an example that everybody can, hopefully, most people can relate to, you know, in terms of the type of product being described here.
Okay. And I also see in the chat a question by David. He says, although not ideal, is it unheard of to have yearly product goals?
I don't know. So I honestly don't know. So, you know, there's nothing kind of wrong with using product goals that last longer than, say, 2 to 6 months. I just generally find it you know, sort of that goes back to the idea in extreme programming. So the first framework that I worked with, the Agile framework, and that's probably true for quite a few people who've been around in the Agile community for a few years, wasn't Scrum, it was extreme programming. And I've always liked the idea in extreme programming of using quarterly releases. So, you know, don't get any longer than 3 months without having at least one release and getting software out, at least to selected users, to a selected controlled test group for various reasons. And so, you know, then if that's what we want to do, we could set ourselves a goal for each quarter. And so again, you know, if we relate that to the idea of product goals, that would kind of, you know, maybe argue for more shorter focused product goals that then incrementally help you achieve, you know, something like an annual goal. You know, I mean, it's not always desirable and feasible to release a product on a quarterly basis. So if you say work on a complex telco product, I remember doing some work with Nokia many years ago, and you know, I asked some of the product owners I was working with why their release cycles, and that was admittedly a good 10 years ago, were 6 months. They said, well, because their customers wouldn't accept more frequent releases due to the work required on the customer side to integrate the software into the existing networks. So then, you know, it may be useful to have a goal at the release level, but still consider breaking it down possibly into sub-goals so you can track progress more easily.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Roman.
So I think we can go to a next question. 2 questions have 4 votes, Roman. I'm not sure if you have a preference. I think one is more tied to the book you wrote about product leadership. The other one is more about success criteria, how to set success criteria for goals.
I don't know, Barry, you tell me.
Well, I am curious because I haven't read your latest book yet, I have to confess, How to Lead in Product Management. And I think what does product leadership not look like, or what should it look like? I think it could be closely connected.
Okay, cool. Then maybe that's something I'll try and say a few words about. And I thought I'd share this diagram and then see if that is helpful. So here we have the 3 Scrum roles, product owner, development team, Scrum masters. Admittedly, I've used sort of the old term for the developers, the development team. And, you know, as I guess Scrum and various people within the Scrum community have emphasized for a long time, what we'd like to achieve is a good and close collaboration between those individuals. That's only possible if people trust and respect each other. Now, what does this have to do with product leadership? Now, you know, I view the Scrum product owner as being responsible for offering leadership, but a specific type of leadership, not people leadership, not process leadership, not design leadership, not technology leadership, but product leadership. So offering a vision and a product strategy and roadmap, not necessarily creating those plans on her own or his own, but ensuring that they exist and ensuring that the appropriate goals exist. So user and business goals in the product strategy, and then say product goals in the product roadmap. And that a product backlog exists and that it is ordered or prioritized. And that the stakeholders participate in the process. And I mean, I wrote here stakeholder community building. You know, that's an idea that I discuss in my latest book. You know, the fundamental suggestion is to move away from kind of managing stakeholders and either, you know, sort of making the mistake of trying to please them and, you know, taking on board what they say because they tell me so, which is one extreme and one kind of mistake I've seen product owners make. And then the other extreme would be to kind of push them away and say like, oh, these pesky stakeholders again, go away. But just like you as the product owner, you'd like to establish a trustful relationship with the developers and the Scrum Master. So I would suggest you'd also like to establish a trustful relationship with the key stakeholders. And then the development team developers, for me, are responsible to offer design and technology leadership. And then the Scrum Master, I think, should offer process and people leadership. And then there are a few shared responsibilities around what I would say user research, agreeing on the sprint goal, and working on the product backlog. And these are shared between the developers and the product owner. Now, what I often find is that product owners in a Scrum context kind of get pulled into other leadership aspects. Sometimes that's just a limited understanding of their role. But sometimes it's because there is no Scrum Master, or a Scrum Master isn't sufficiently available, or the Scrum Master isn't adequately qualified. And then the Scrum product owner takes on parts of the Scrum Master role. And by doing so, a challenging and difficult job becomes, well, even harder. And, if that continues, then usually either some of the core responsibilities, often the more strategic ones around product strategy, product discovery, are neglected, or the Scrum product owner becomes overworked. And clearly that's not in the interest of the individual, but also, in Agile, we have this idea of sustainable pace, and this principle would be violated. Or I see a similar thing happening with product owners then trying to help out in the development team and maybe, offering some help around user experience design. But again, for me, that's not the job of the product owner. For me, a Scrum product owner should really focus on the product, on ensuring that there's a real need for this product. There's a real demand for it, and there's some real benefits that product offers. And there's a plan, like a product roadmap, and specific desirable goals or outcomes, benefits that the product should create, say, over the next 12 months, rather than, saying, this is what the user interaction should look like, or this is what the user interface design should look like. So for me, I'd like to really encourage all those of you who work as product owners to focus on that product leadership aspect, and kind of not get drawn into development aspects or Scrum Master work. And if you, for instance, don't have a Scrum Master, then I think that's really the issue you should recognize, and that's in a way the impediment to address. And if you were to cover the Scrum Master role for an extended period of time, then you'd be hiding an organizational impediment, and ultimately you're not doing yourself and you're not doing the organization a favor. I mean, why would the management change anything if you as the product owner seem to be able to also play the Scrum Master role rather successfully? Why hire a dedicated Scrum Master? Hey, seems to be working okay, no problem. Nice. So I thought that's one thing I share. The other thing I wanted to share is sort of around leadership behaviors and kind of leadership styles. And a while back, I thought, what would be good leadership behavior for product people and for a Scrum product owner? And I found that really kind of hard to characterize, because I think it very much depends on the situation we're in, right? So, often product owners are characterized as being visionary leaders and, coming up with this amazing inspirational goal, and that kind of pulls everyone along and everybody's happy and super motivated to do all the work required. And that can be great when you are working on a product, maybe particularly a new product or a young product, and things are going reasonably well. But in a situation of crises, that probably isn't the right leadership approach. So, instead of trying to say, okay, use this specific leadership style, what this picture here is doing, it says, avoid two unhelpful extremes. So avoid being a feature broker. So, which means really that you kind of try and just accommodate the requests, often from powerful stakeholders, and kind of try and please them. And so, product owners and generally product people's job is not to please the stakeholders. Our job is to maximize the value of our products. Now, of course, we'd like to ensure as much buy-in from the stakeholders as we can. but I do not expect that every stakeholder is always super happy with every single product decision. That's not the point. The point is that the stakeholders understand those decisions, that they were sufficiently involved in the decision-making process, had an opportunity to influence the decision, had an opportunity to voice their ideas and concerns and any underlying needs. But you know, I always say to product people, look for the right decision, the decision that moves your product forward in the right way and gets you as much buy-in as possible. But you know, if you just try and please the stakeholders or kind of satisfy the stakeholders, then the chances are that you end up with a feature soup, a loose collection of incoherent features, and such a product usually has a poor value proposition and a poor user experience. So I avoid that extreme. And then the other extreme would be a little bit possibly what we heard earlier about the product owner who says, I don't need to talk to the users and the customers, I know best. You know, that, you know, so, you know, being a product dictator means I make the decisions here, right? I'm the owner. I know best, you know, it's my way or the highway. So I mentioned earlier, sort of seeing the stakeholders as being a little bit annoying and pesky people and go away. And yeah, that would be sort of maybe a product dictator type behavior. So I would suggest that a healthy leadership style is being sort of, you know, maybe balanced, being a balanced product owner, somewhere here in the middle, where you avoid these two extremes. Certainly avoid these two extremes for an extended period of time.
Cool. Let's see, Chadwick, you raise your hand. Is it still relevant?
Yes.
Let's just share it.
Yes, I have a question on the slide 16. You have maybe for Roman, see if you can answer this. So I can see multiple leadership in the slide 16, but just would like to ask about when people ask about for the agile leadership. So from your perspective, yeah, who is owning that, or it is a shared leadership from the whole Scrum team?
I think so, yeah, and I think it is ultimately shared leadership. What I've tried to do here is kind of tease out a little bit the different leadership aspects and associate them with specific Scrum roles. You know, I mean, ultimately, the entire Scrum team, you know, should feel responsible for making the product successful. But I think, you know, it tends to be useful to have one person who, in particularly, understands what it takes to make the product successful, what value the product should create, who the users are, who the customers are, why they would want to use or maybe pay for the product in one way or another, and what benefits the product should offer to the business, and you know what the maybe standout features of the product are. And again, for me, that'd be the product owner, and that would then enable the person to kind of lead the strategic decision-making processes. But the development team members and the Scrum Master, and I would also argue the key stakeholders, should be integrated, should be involved in this decision-making process.
Yeah. So leadership is a shared responsibility, and everyone can have a different focus on what type of leadership they could show.
Yeah, I'd say
Thank
so.
you.
So again, you know, maybe there's the two extremes. Like one extreme is everybody does everything and nobody does anything.
Mm.
The other extreme is I'm the product owner and I decide, go away developer, go away Scrum Master, go away stakeholder. And again, you know, I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's effective. So I think it's good to have ultimately shared ownership, but also, you know, have a clear focus and have people who take care of specific leadership aspects.
Yeah, good one. So there are 9 minutes left. We have 2 more questions, but I'm also curious, Roman, is there a topic that we haven't addressed yet that you would like to bring focus to or talk about?
Can we talk about bikes or saxophones? I'm joking.
Would be interesting.
not this boring product ownership and Scrum stuff. Man, can we talk about something
Let's talk
real?
about saxophones.
So no, I'm happy to cover the questions that you have as a group. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
sure. So let's go to the one. Let me read it out loud. When it comes to setting goals, teams and stakeholders generally can formulate a goal. However, they find it a lot harder to set some clear success criteria for these goals. How can I help the team to create them? Any tips or advice?
Cool. Yeah, I can try and share maybe a little bit of advice. So I think the first thing that's useful to do is to be clear on what goal are we talking about. Because, you know, if it was the vision, that's at least my understanding, is an inspirational goal. It really describes the purpose of the product. So an inspirational goal, by definition, you know, you can't measure that. You know, it's not specific. So if it's an unspecific, unmeasurable goal, there's no point defining any success criteria or metrics. So in terms of the vision, I'd say, don't worry. You know, a big, vague vision, in fact, you know, can be very nice, such as healthy eating, for instance, for a healthy eating product. When it comes to the user and business goals, you know, I think you should be able to describe those goals and make them so specific that you can at least choose the right key performance indicators. So I have some sample goals here, and you can see there's a user and business goal here. And the user goal is, so this is what I'm talking about, reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Now, this goal may or may not be specific enough, but for me now to select the right KPIs, key performance indicators, the right metrics, but it should be, it certainly should be. So if it wasn't, I'd have to iterate over it and refine it. Now, if I'd say, like, I'm finding this hard, I'm finding this really hard to refine this goal, but it's not specific enough so I can select the right metrics, then I'd say, well, I may lack some of the relevant knowledge and I need to carry out more product discovery work. And maybe talk to users, observe users, maybe do some competitor research and some competitor analysis, and, you know, other activities that help me acquire the relevant knowledge. Yeah, the same is true with a revenue source. You know, I may have to refine this goal and maybe try and quantify it possibly. Yeah, and then for the product goal, I'd say the product goal certainly has to be measurable and it has to be specific. So, you know, this is, I'll add to this. So this can be big and it can be unspecific. In fact, it should be, yeah. So here, these types of goals, they should be specific enough so you can select KPIs. And the product goal here, at least if you follow my advice, this hierarchy here, it should be specific and measurable. So you can formulate specific targets. Yeah. Again, if that's not possible, you may have to refine your goal. You may have to iterate over it. Or if it's down to lack of knowledge, you may have to go back up and say, okay, do we understand the user and business goals? Do we understand the market well enough, the context of our product? And if not, do we first have to acquire the relevant knowledge there? Yeah. And with sprint goals, as they're short and tactical in nature, again, I'd say they should be specific and measurable. Specific and measurable. If they're not, again, you know, consider revising them, consider iterating over them, because I think it's really useful for sprint goals to be to clearly understand at the end of a sprint, okay, have we achieved our sprints or haven't we? So, for instance, if I wanted to find out if people are willing to share personal information before they start using my healthy eating app, and, you know, because I might be concerned that this could be a barrier for adoption and a barrier for activating the app, then I should say, okay, you know, how am I going to find out that, you know, this risk has been successfully addressed? And I might say, well, I'm going to do some user tests, or I'm going to do a demo, and I'll demo the product to 5 users or 10 users. And out of those 10 users, 7 people have to say, that looks good. Yeah, I'd be happy to share that information. So, you know, that I think about these kind of success criteria. Similarly with the product goal, you know, if my goal is, as it's stated here, help the users understand their eating habits and acquire an initial user base, I have to sort of think about, okay, how big should the user base be? How many people do I want to acquire? And, you know, what does it mean to understand the eating habits? Can I maybe refine this, or can I add some specific targets here? You know, so it becomes truly measurable. In the various ways how you can do it, you can either, again, iterate over those goal statements and refine them, or as I've done here with this specific format, the goals are stated, the goal is stated, up here, and then I've tried to add some success criteria here. And together, hopefully that will result in a goal that is specific enough and can be measured. So it's clear if the goal has been met or hasn't.
Wow, you've managed to answer all the questions, Roman. I'm not sure if there still is time, but I do like the question that would be then the final question that Marisa added. And it's also a topic that we haven't covered yet, component teams and feature teams. Do you have time, Roman, for one final question?
Yeah, hopefully.
Marisa, can you maybe share your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So, Roman, my question is, well, not so much about feature teams on itself, but in my organization, and I'm a very fresh product person, we're flipping from traditional component teams or application teams, and we're trying to move towards a real value chain. And it sounds so simple to say, okay, so we're now defining the products and then make proper product end-to-end teams. But it turns out not to be so simple, because we have endless discussions on what part of the product should belong where. Would you have any tips or suggestions to help us muddle through this?
I don't know. So first of all, thank you for sharing your question. And then again, I think it's one of those challenges that aren't that are fairly common, fairly common when you try and embrace a more product-led way of working. I'm not sure why this is so blurred now. Sorry about this. I'm not sure. Another technical issue, I guess, glitch. So I think what tends to be really beneficial is to have a shared definition, a shared understanding of what is a product. So I can't remember a single larger established business I've worked for or I've worked with in the past, whatever, many years, 25 years, that had a clear and, kind of generally accepted definition of what a product is. I remember I was working for Intel in the late 90s, and I was working as part of their, I was working on a new product for their distributor business. And as part of that, we did some research into, the definition of product. It's just one of the things that we bumped against. And it turned out that at that time, Intel had over 20, I think it was nearly 23 or something definitions of what a product was. And in the late 90s, Intel was a much smaller company than it is today, and it had a much more narrow product portfolio. It was just essentially processors. That was it. And still, there were so many different definitions of products at the company. And initially, I thought, like, well, that's just Intel, right? But then over the years, I discovered that's normal. That's completely normal. So I'd really encourage you to go back in a way to square one and to basics and say, what do we mean by product? Because once you've got that clear, and once you've got a generally acceptable definition of what a product is, particularly a digital product, then I think it'll be much easier to identify those products and say, okay, now who should own that product and who should develop that product? And is one person enough to own and manage that product, or do we need multiple people? And if several people need to be involved in owning and managing that product, how should they organize themselves? Do we need any specific product roles? Do we want to use a specific scaling framework? But again, for me, it's all down to what is a product. And when you define what a product is, then always think about the users and customers in the business. And initially look from the outside in. Don't make the mistake of saying, well, I mean, I've certainly seen, so I'm not saying that you're making this mistake, but I've seen teams make that mistake saying, well, we're working on payment, so therefore payment must be a product. It may or may not be. I mean, if I'd say a product generally is something that creates value for users, and then you may have some supporting products, but always start with the users and find out, why do people come and engage with your products and services or use your assets? What do they want from it? Look at the user journeys and look at the value that is being created for the users, and use that as a starting point then to identify your products. So you don't kind of fall into this myopic trap of saying, this is how we're organized, this is how we work, therefore these must be the products that we have.
Yeah, that's very useful. The user journey is I was going, in my mind, it was going through the last few discussions we had, and it would have helped if we had that focus, because then it would suddenly have been, well, not very clear, but somewhat more clear. Thank you.
So thanks for raising the question as well, Marise. And by that, we have reached the end of this session, and we have managed to cover a wide variety of topics, which is excellent. There's actually only one thing left to do. And Roman, can you maybe stop sharing your screen?
Of course.
Because we're gonna do someone can win the audiobook of Roman's latest book, How to Lead in Product Management. I'm gonna make it very simple, and you have to trust me with this one, because I've got a huge iMac, a huge screen, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna close my eyes, and I can see everyone right now, and I'm just gonna point to the screen, and the one that I'm pointing to, that's the one that wins the audiobook. And I hope you forgive me for this very easy approach, so I can right now see everyone. So I'm now gonna close my eyes as well. And let's see who won. Victor Oliveira. So Victor, you haven't got the audiobook yet? Just checking.
No, thank you.
Well, congrats, you won the audio. You won the audiobook. Well, this was the quickest way to do this kind of lottery. And maybe you can share your email, Victor, in the chat, and then I'll make sure you'll get it.
Okay.
Roman, thanks a lot again for making this possible, and that you were willing to volunteer your free and valuable time with us. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here that this was tremendously valuable. And we are still going to do a debrief. There's lots of stuff to talk about afterwards, but this also would be the moment to say goodbye to you. Is there anything that you would like to say, Roman?
No, apart from thanks for having me. It was nice. Thank you for your questions. It was really nice to be with you this afternoon and chat. I hope it was a little bit useful. And yeah, all the best.
Cool. So this is the moment where we are going to wave. If you need to leave as well, feel free to leave this call, and then we're going to continue in a moment. So thanks, Roman, and see you again. Bye-bye.